Okay guys, today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. Now the quadratic formula is a formula that can be used to solve any quadratic equation no matter what. It doesn't matter if you can factor it, it doesn't matter if you can solve it any other way, it will solve any quadratic equation. Now the reason that we don't use it for every single quadratic equation is because it takes a little bit of work. So if I look at this guy, here's my quadratic formula. To solve for x, I just need to take the opposite of my b value plus or minus the square root of my b value squared minus 4 times my a value times my c value all over 2 times my a value. That's the quadratic formula. Now don't forget, the b value is in front of your x to the first, the a value is in front of your x to the second, and your c value is the constant hanging out here by itself. So if we look at number 1, it says solve each equation by using the quadratic formula. Round to the nearest tenth if necessary. So I have x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify what our a value, our b value, and our c value are. So my a value for this problem is going to be 1. My b value for this problem is going to be negative 3, and my c value for this problem is going to be 2. So I have a equals 1, b equals negative 3, and c equals 2. Now all we have to do is take this information and substitute it into the formula for the quadratic. So I have the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's start with this first guy here, the opposite of my b value. Now currently my b value is negative 3. So the opposite of that is going to give me positive 3. Then I want plus or minus, and then I'm going to make a big radical symbol, the square root of. Now I make it nice and long because I know I'm going to have to fit all of this information underneath there. Now, b squared minus 4 times a times c. So let's start with my b squared. We said my b value is negative 3. So I'm going to take that negative 3 and square it. And here's how we're going to write it. We're going to put that negative 3 in parentheses, and then have the squared up there. I want you to write it out so that you remember when you put it into your calculator, you put parentheses around it. Minus 4 times, now let's see what I can substitute in for a. My a value is 1, so we're going to put a 1 in there. And then c is 2. Then we have it all over, so I want to make my fraction bar nice and long, and I want 2 times my a value. Now again, we said my a value was 1, so I'm just going to go ahead and multiply that by 2 right away. 2 times 1 is 2. So this is what it looks like when I have all of the numbers substituted into my formula correctly. Now we're going to work on solving. Now the first thing, according to the order of operations, is grouping. And remember, a fraction bar is a grouping symbol, so I want to handle my numerator first. Again, in my numerator, a radical is also grouping, so I want to handle this guy right here, everything underneath the radical first. Now, everything under the radical is actually going to give me a number called the discriminant. The discriminant is whatever number ends up under the radical. The discriminant will tell me how many solutions my parabola, my quadratic equation, will have. So if I have a positive number under there, I'm going to have 2 solutions. If I have a negative number under there, I'm not going to have any real solutions because I can't take the square root of a negative symbol. And if I have a 0 under there, that means I'm just going to have 1 solution. So whatever kind of number I get back is going to tell me what I'm going to be working with. So let's substitute this into my calculator to see what I get in return. So I'm going to have, it says parentheses negative 3, close my parentheses squared, minus 4 times parentheses 1, close your parentheses, times 2, close your parentheses. This is what you should have in your calculator. Let's see what we get. When we hit enter, we should get 1. So I'll have 3 plus or minus the square root of 1 all over 2. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to see if this is a nice number. So here I have the square root of 1, and I want to know if 1 is a perfect square number. Well, when we list out our perfect square numbers, 1 through 15, the first number on the list is 1, because 1 squared is 1. So since 1 is a perfect square number, we can take the square root of it. So I'm going to take the square root of 1, which is just 1, and that's going to give me 3 plus or minus 1 over 2. Now when you have these two signs here, that's really like saying we have two different equations. We have an addition equation, we have a subtraction equation. So let's see what happens when I split it up. This really means I'll have 3 plus 1 over 2, and I'll have 3 minus 1 over 2. So I'm going to get two answers here because it's positive. Now let's see what my two answers are. If I start with this guy, I'll take 3 plus 1, and that gives me 4. And over here I'll have 3 minus 1, which gives me 2. And now I can simplify. So 4 over 2 gives me 2, and 2 over 2 gives me 1. So the two solutions to this equation are 2 and 1. Now since these are nice numbers, that really means we could have actually factored this. We could have done this by easy factoring and we would have got nice numbers in return. But the quadratic formula also works.